Welcome back to Wisco MTB. I'm Tim, and today we're going to be... Welcome back to Wisco MTB. I'm Tim, and now this feels like a mountain biking video. And if you're watching this, the weather is probably turned, and you're thinking a little bit more about the GoPro, the footage that you get. How can you make improvements to your YouTube channel? Okay, and that's what we want to talk about today. We want to look at the GoPro. We want to look at the settings that you've got on it so that you're not using it right out of the box, so that your footage is exactly what you need it to be before you get to the second part of the process, which is your workflow in post. We're going to take a look at your editor, some of the basic adjustments that you can make there, and how you can make your GoPro footage look fantastic. All right, let's get started. So it's worthwhile mentioning that I'm on the 8, but the settings are going to be pretty much the same between the 8 and the 9. And even down to the 7, most of these settings will translate really well. So we're going to hop in here, and like I said, I'm going to just breeze over this very quickly. You can take any one of these profiles here, and you can go ahead and adjust it. I'm going to go in, and the very first thing that you want is you want to check this to 4K, 24 frames per second. It's automatically just going to give it a more filmic look here. It's going to add in that motion blur. It's going to make you seem a lot faster than maybe what you are, okay? But it also just looks incredible too. That's the main reason that we're really focusing on this. The next thing is a preferential thing. In your lens setting, you can go with wide or you can go with super view here. And some people really like that super view. I don't like it because it tends to crop the video and it gets so fisheye that it just feels like kind of almost like tunnel vision. So I tend to keep mine at wide, which still has a little bit of fisheye, and I still see plenty of the trail, and I see the right parts of my bike as well. After that, you've got your hyper smooth. Okay, and a lot of people like to put this on boost, but it does tend to add a lot of cropping to the video. And this is where the differences can be between the 8 and the 9. You're going to have to just mess with that to see what you like best. I tend to put it on to the high setting for the 8, and that tends to work really well. It does crop the video a little bit, but it still works really well for what you're going to see on the screen. After we get those basic settings there, we're going to hop down into the Pro Tune area here. And what we want to do in the Pro Tune is we want to take our bitrate first off, which is just like a puddle of information here. It doesn't give you much flexibility to work in post. We're going to switch this up to high. So now in the high bitrate, we're going to actually get a lot more information. It's going to give us a better image quality overall, so we're going to go with that. The shutter, we're going to leave it at auto, and then we're going to go into the EV settings here. We're going to take that down to -1. Okay? And what that's going to do is it's just going to get rid of some of those crazy highlights. The GoPro tends to have a lot of gain on it, and this is going to switch it up so that's not the case, and you're not going to get that constant washout of your sensor here. Next, we're going to head into white balance, maybe. And on the white balance, if you are outside and you are on the trails, all right, the optimal setup is 5500. Okay, if it tends to be a little bit like overcast and all that, you can switch it from 5500 to 6K, but for the most part, it's almost always going to work on 5500 here. It's a great color choice for your white balance. We go back, we're not going to touch the ISO. We are going to go into the sharpness though. GoPro footage historically has been very sharp. So we're going to take that high setting and we're going to put it down as low as it can go, because this is one of the things that we're going to adjust in post manually, and we're going to have a much better control over that as opposed to letting the GoPro do that. Okay. Now the most important part I think here is the color. Right? Out of the box, it's set up to be the GoPro color. We want to take that color and we just want to take it away. It tends to be overly saturated, out of control color, and we really want to change it up to that flat color scheme here, or that color profile, so that we can work on that. Okay. Now raw audio, I'm not going to mess with that, but I am going to go into the wind one here, and I'm going to take the wind noise and I'm going to set it off. The mic tends to do its own thing here. It auto balances, and it really doesn't know what to do with mountain biking footage. So I find it's best to do most of this in post, so I'm going to turn off that wind reduction. Those are all your settings. We're going to hop back in. We've got our footage ready to rock and roll here, 4K 24 wide, and now I'm going to go into that And from here, I'm ready to start taking a look at those other settings in post. So once you get some of that footage, what can you do with that footage to make it really look good in post? Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now we're going to head into the second part of the workflow. You've already captured your footage on the trail. You're going to bring it into your editor of choice. And with that editor, you're going to go through and make some minor adjustments to it that are going to make it look incredible here. First one that I'm going to start with is Final Cut Pro. I'm going to begin there because I'm the most familiar with that program and I can really edit quickly with it. And I just feel like for a time amount, like I can really rip through a lot of footage very quickly with that one. It is a paid program. It's $2.99 on the App Store. It is for Apple products only, for that's another limitation here. Another alternative to Final Cut Pro is Adobe Premiere. Again, it's a paid application, and this is the one that I use that if I have like a more intense workflow where I have to take clips, I have to edit them, and then I have to add some special effects to them, do some titling, do some masking, you know, different things like that, just basically to add the visual magic. I like Premiere because it allows me to also use Adobe After Effects. We're not going to talk about that today, but it's a little bit more involved. It's a little bit more of like an advanced feature. And definitely a little bit more challenging to use. I don't edit as quickly on Premiere, but the edits are awesome. It's professional grade. The last one that I'm going to talk about here is DaVinci Resolve. I'll demonstrate how you can bring your work in there, use the same exact workflow. And really that's our goal. Between Final Cut, between Premiere, and between DaVinci Resolve, it's all about kind of showing that workflow and how it's exactly the same thing. So let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, we're going to start with Final Cut Pro, and let's begin. And I've already taken the liberty of opening up some footage here, okay, and kind of getting this set up so that you can see what we've got. And here's Corey come down a little bit of a rock garden, okay, and we progress along. Now, if you take a look at this footage here, this is not the footage that we got out of camera. This is after we've made all of our adjustments. So this is what we began with, okay, just to give you an idea. I'm going to take off this, I'm going to take off some coloring. I'm going to take off that sharpen effect. I'm going to take off the color board. And that's what we began with. Now this is the flat color profile right out of the GoPro. No Pro Tune, there was no GoPro color. This is that flat setting. And I know it looks terrible, but we're about to make it look incredible and we have way more control over what we're about to do to this footage. Okay, so I'm going to start at the beginning of this to kind of give you an idea. And to be honest, this workflow is very similar in all of the programs. The same concepts are there. Okay, so the very first thing, and let me delete some stuff out of here. Very first thing that I would begin with is I'd identify an area in your footage that looks pretty similar to the rest of the areas that we're looking at. Now to begin with, for the early steps here, what I like to do is I like to find some handlebar footage here to help me actually get the right highlight settings and then also to sharpen this footage. So let's begin there. I'm going to go up and in Final Cut Pro, like the rest of the software here, we are going to do a color correction on this. Just simply means that we're going to adjust a little bit of the exposure because the GoPro, even though it's on that 5500 and it's got the ISO preset on there, it's going to have some crazy highlights, it's going to have some crazy shadows going on, and we're just going to adjust those very quickly. And if you don't understand, you know, color correction whatsoever, that's okay. We're going to just keep it really super simple here. First thing that I would do in Final Cut Pro is I'd have you bring up your video scopes. Okay, once you bring up those video scopes, they're going to pop up to the left of your viewer just like this. This is not the default one that pops up in Final Cut Pro. We're going to go right in and we're going to switch this up to RGB Parade, which is the one that you're looking at right now. Okay, now with that, long story short, we've got red, green, and blue represented. We've got our highlights up on top, which is all that sun that's poking through the leaves here. And then we've got our shadows at the bottom, which are basically the dark on the trees, on the trail itself, the shadows, okay? So we're gonna adjust those two things out of the gates here to kind of get exactly what we're looking for. So I usually go in, and in Final Cut Pro, they have the little bit of color mode here where you can add on your little color adjustment. And it's misleading because it says color correction, but really what we're doing is we're just going to do the exposure because we already set the color profile on your GoPro at 5500. we're gonna leave that part. We're just gonna do the exposure. So I'm gonna take the highlights down, okay? And I usually take these about 10% below 100, okay? And then I take the shadows and I bring those up. And since the red and green are already up there, I'm not gonna bring it up so that the blue's all the way up there too. I'm just gonna kind of guesstimate in between, and again, about 10% up from the bottom as a starting point. Then the midtones, what we're going to do is we're going to adjust those to our liking. So if you want it to be a little bit darker, you can add it on in the midtones here. Or if you like that little bit of like washed out look here, you can kind of go with that. We're going to go kind of in between there, right about there. Okay. Now, we've roughly color corrected, and that should work pretty much for the rest of the footage that we've got here. If there's anything where we step off the bike and we're pointing our camera up, you know, at something else, like here I'm looking up towards Corey, I might adjust this a little bit differently because I'm going to cut around it, and I would adjust all those clips. That's your first step, is to go through, color correct this stuff. Okay, so now we've got our color correction. I'm going to go back to the previous marked spot that I've got here. The reason I'm going back here is I can see my handlebars, and this is going to help us adjust how sharp our image is. Remember, we took the setting for detail and we put it all the way down to the least amount of detail that the GoPro can manage. Okay, because it tends to over sharpen the image. What we're going to do is we're going to go down into our effects down here, and I'm going to go to all of the effects. Then I'm going to just do a quick search down here. Let me zoom in down here so you can see what's going on. And I'm just going to go to sharpen, okay, so that it brings that up. You can see the effect is over here. I'm going to take that and I'm going to drag that right onto my footage here. And this will be one thing that you just kind of set it, and it'll be set for all of your footage. Now, I don't know if you can hear, but my fan is really kicked up at this point. We're in high gear at this point. It's really rendering. It's taxing the machine, but what I want to do is I want to sharpen this image. Actually, here's a really nice one here that I can look at. Boom. Let's go to that. I can see my stem cap here. I can really focus in on the writing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my view, and let's go ahead and change this up percentage-wise so we're a little bit zoomed in. And then I'm going to move this box here so that I can see the ride more, work less, okay, from my Ripmo. And now I'm going to go ahead and sharpen this so it's a little bit crisper, because again, that low setting. I'm going to hop back to my footage. I'm up in the inspector area here. You can see now that I added that effect on here by dragging it onto my footage, I can go in here and I can put this down to 0. So this is what it looked like right out of the gates. Okay, not much going on there. Now I'm going to dial it up, and you got to be careful. If you overkill this, it starts to look like a graphic novel here. We're going to take this down. We're just going to keep whittling it down until it looks acceptable. And I usually jump right in about 3-ish. Okay, somewhere in there. There's 2.9. If it starts to show a lot of the noise here on my handlebars, then I know I'm in trouble. Okay, let's go back out to 100% to see what that looks like. Let's go and fit this actually into the view so I can see roughly what I've got. And there we go. Okay, so a lot crisper. You can see the details are really clear now. Everything looks a lot better. So I mean, if I even go back here and I look at this footage, if you look at the leaves, you can actually see the individual leaves now. It's very nice. If I take that sharpen off, it's going to turn into a little bit more of a blurry, kind of muddy mess here. Okay, put that back on. Now, I've color corrected, I've sharpened it, and then the last thing is to really kind of go for the look that you want. What we've done here, and what's going to be, is we've created our own LUT. We ride on the same terrain like 95% of the time. We're in lush green forest, hardwood forest, and we have water usually that's around us. We have the highlights that are poking through. I mean, and this works whether it's blue sky or gray sky, but the green foliage is really the part that is a big part of all of our videos. I mean, if you scan through here, this is up in Minnesota actually, but you can see all the footage with the rocks and everything. I mean, very lush. And this is fall actually, so we're getting a little bit more color popping here going on. All right, but you get kind of the idea. Now, we made our own LUT, and we're going to include that in the description below for free. So if you want to use that, go for it, because this was one of the things we struggled to find to begin with out of the gates. Like I said, a progression. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the color settings. If you are not familiar with Final Cut, we've got our settings over here. These are our video effects. I bring that up, I go into color. Let me go ahead and get rid of my search for sharpen here. And I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna grab a custom LUT. Now this is the next part of the workflow. So we color corrected, we sharpened our footage, and now we're going into actually color grade. Okay, this color grading is going to give it a different look and feel altogether. It's going to be kind of surprising and shocking here. And this is the one that I want to go to for this shot so you can see what it does to the footage. Okay, so there it is, not too bad. Okay, let's bring this custom LUT on here. You're not going to see any changes out of the gates, okay, because I haven't added the LUT yet. Now the LUT is a lookup table. For those of you that want to get more nerdy on this. And a lookup table basically takes pixel by pixel and reassigns RGB values. Okay, which means that we have a lot of control over the color. This is why we switched our image quality on the GoPro from the low setting to the 10-bit setting so that we have more detail that's included in there. Like I said, a puddle versus like an ocean of information. And I wouldn't say an ocean, it's a GoPro, it's not a film camera. Okay, so we're gonna go to a LUT and we're going to go ahead and pick our custom Wisco MTV LUT here. And voila, you can see the difference right out of the gates here. Okay, so I'll just click that off. Here's our before. Okay, which is right out of the camera pretty much. And then here's our after. And now we have a much more filmic look that we've got. The nice part is when it relates to the rest of the footage here, because we're all relatively in the same area with the same lighting, you know, pretty consistently all the way through, you can see we've got those settings. Now if I look through and I've cut this up, this is a good time that I just do a little bit of adjusting maybe on my color board to say, okay, well this is a little dark maybe, okay, and I can adjust those things out. That's all preference to you. You just go back to your color board and then you do one final tweaking on your exposure to make sure that this is 100% what you want. I've got it set exactly what I want right now. I think it looks great. This is incredible. This is much better than our early videos that we started with, which we're sorry. I mean, our early videos were really sorry to say the least. Now, that's the workflow in Final Cut Pro. From here now, we can take a look at Adobe Premiere. So let's switch over to that. So in Premiere, we've got the actual setup here, and you can see a lot of similarities to Final Cut. I've got two clips that I've dragged in here from the last ride with my son. And these clips, let's go back to this one here so you can take a look, right? And here it is with it all color graded. And we've got all our colors applied. You can see it's very filmic looking, it's nice, the colors are rich, the detail is great, and this is what it looked like prior to that. So I'm gonna take off all the color effects, and I'm gonna unsharpen it, and there we go. And that's what it looked like right out of the camera. And this is what I see a lot of times on a lot of channels is footage that looks just like this. It's kind of bland, the colors don't really pop, and it doesn't really resemble what we did when we were riding. So the idea here is let's make it look like our ride, at least the way that we remember it. Okay, so let's get started with this process. I'm gonna go ahead and delete these effects. Actually, let's just go ahead and put those back on so we can see those. There it is, sharpened. There it is with the color. Incredible. I'm gonna go to the next clip and we'll go through these steps here, and you'll notice that the workflow is basically the same. I'm gonna start off with this clip, and I've got it all cut down, I've got everything all set the way that I want, I've done my editing, my ins and outs and all that. Now I'm gonna start going through this process of actually getting the color. Okay, so I'm gonna color correct first. So in Premiere, that means up top here, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to go to the color setting. I head to color. That's going to bring up a whole different set of tools here that I've got. Now, over on the right side is where I like to work with this. You can drag this over, you can work over on the other side as well. That's all well and dandy here. I'm going to switch up one thing though that helps out a lot. Again, remember in Final Cut Pro we brought up those scopes and we had like a crash course on how to read those scopes. Here they are again. If you're not seeing these scopes, you can go down to the little wrench here. You can switch it up to parade. I don't need to see the waveform. I just need to see the RGB parade. And I actually switched it from 8-bit to 10-bit because I know that's the setting that we used in our GoPro because of how we set it up at the very beginning. So we've got that all set. Now from here, I'm going to do a basic color correction. So again, when we do our color correction, we're talking about our highlights, we're talking about our midtones, and our shadows. Those are the main things. This is a basic color correction. So I'm going to come over here, and using those scopes, I can see that I've got a lot of highlights in there. So I'm going to back those highlights down, okay? And I'm not going to do it all at once in here this time with this program, okay? I'm going to go to my shadows. I'm going to go ahead and bring those down actually a little bit here. Kind of deepen those up so that they're a little bit closer to zero. I'm going to take the whites, which is related to our overall highlights as well, because you can see the back sky is all kind of washed out here. It's pretty intense. And you can see the RGB value again come down. I'm going to bring it down to about 10% below 100. Just a rough guide here. Now with the black level, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring that up here. So again, it's just a little bit above that 0 mark here because we don't want to crush the blacks on this, which means there's no detail whatsoever. Okay, now I've got those all set. I'm just going to fine tune with those shadows then to kind of get this all set to my liking. And we've got that right about in there. And we've got that right about there. Okay, not too bad. And now with the contrast, I can play around with this too to kind of get that either faded film look, or I can add in a little bit more detail so it sharpens it up. Not sharpens it up, but just makes it a little bit more crisp as well. So I bring those in. And if I'm ever in doubt, if I'm like doing damage to this, I can zoom in here and I can take a look. Wow, he's got a lot of effort on his face there. That's great. So now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna hop in here and I'm gonna take a look. Okay, what do I need? Contrast, let's check that out. You can see it's kind of washed out there. And if I add on too much contrast, see how his shirt loses all that detail there, and the trees get really unnatural looking. So I'm going to kind of strike a balance right in between there. And I have my first color correction done here. Really basic. Okay. Now, we're going to continue along our path here because we did our color correction. And then the second step was to sharpen up our image again. Because again, we had that low setting. Let's hop in here. I'm going to take my footage, and very similar to Final Cut Pro, I'm going to go to my Effects tab, and up here you can see I've already searched for it once, Sharpen, and then I'm going to grab that Sharpen effect and I'm going to drag it right onto that clip there. Now that I've got that on there, I can come over to the side where I have my effect controls. Let's just go ahead and zoom in over here. And this is just a simple slider. So I can take that sharpen amount, drop it down here, and I can adjust that out. Now, this is where it helps to kind of find a spot on your picture or on your video that's going to work really well with this. Let me zoom back out. I'm going to pinch in here so that we can see what's going on. Get the hand tool. And I'm just going to come down to this corner here where I know there's a bunch of leaves and rocks and things like that with detail. You can see it's all kind of like soft right now. You can't really tell where the edges are. And then I'm going to take that sharpen amount and I'm going to dial that up here. And you can see there it is with the sharpen on. Okay, and now we can see a lot more edges. I'm going to go ahead and click that off. And you can see it goes back to being really soft and almost blurred. Okay, so I'm going to sharpen that back up. Now, let's go ahead and look at our overall image, because sometimes you can over sharpen and not even realize it. Now let's go ahead and look at my son with all of that effort on his face here. Okay, bring this down right there. And that looks pretty good. And I'm zoomed in quite a bit. This is like 200%. So if you're seeing some pixels, that's why here. Okay, oh, not bad, not bad. He's got good jumping for him. We color corrected, we sharpened, and now we're gonna color grade. So this is where we add our signature look to it. Again, lots of greens in Wisconsin, so I'm gonna go ahead and use the Wisco MTB LUT, and I'm gonna drag that on here. So with our clip selected, I'm gonna go back up to the color tab up here. And in the color tab, I'm gonna head on over here. It says Input LUT. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and grab the actual LUT that we created. I'm gonna go to Browse. Go to our desktop. And again, if you don't have any of these LUTs, you can grab this one from the description. It's a great starter LUT. We kind of set it up from Wisconsin. And if this is something that, well, you've got different terrain in your area, like you're out in an arid desert, you have lots of oranges, you're out at Arches National Park in Utah, that kind of thing, where you've got lots of red and orange, you're gonna have a totally different LUT that you would want to use than this. And my plan is if you're interested, go ahead and leave a comment down in the description below. I'll show you how to create your own custom LUT so that you can then bring that into your video footage and then make your mountain biking footage look exactly the way that you remember it looking. Okay, so here we go. I've got that loaded up and open, and voila, we brought that up, brought it in. Now, in looking at this, I'm gonna go ahead and fit this back in here so I can see all of it. Okay, right away out of the gates, I can see, okay, well, I've got the color on there that I like. Looks nice, but you can see that it's a little bit dark. So this is where I'm gonna do some extra adjusting. This is the final kind of adjustment, just to sweeten this all up. I'm gonna go to that contrast. I'm gonna dial that back a little bit, okay? And then I'm gonna take those shadows and I'm definitely going to bring those up a bit. I'm gonna bring blacks up just a little bit, and then I'm gonna take the whites and actually I'm gonna leave those pretty close to where we are. Highlights, bring those back a little bit more. Okay, and again, we're looking at this. Okay, that's the overall tone there. All right, and then I can get my exposure and I can just tweak that ever so slightly on my exposure too. Right about a quarter step up here. Right about in there. Okay, so there we go. We've got our footage. That's me cheering. Okay, and then we've got that. So here's our previous shot, and then there's this shot. Okay, and that still feels a little bit saturated to me, like it's a little out of control with the color. So again, I can hop right in here. I can go to the overall saturation, and let's see if I can remember where that is. We've got our highlight saturation. Here we go. And I'm going to just dial that down ever so slightly here because it was a little crazy. We'll try 85%, a little bit more, about 90-ish, right in there. So you got those basic adjustments. This is where you create that look. All right, so now we're in DaVinci Resolve. I've already brought in some of my footage. If you have not used this before, you can literally drag and drop footage into your media pool here. And then you can drag it from your media pool down into your timeline. Okay, and by default, I believe it's going to start off on this tab, which is your cut tab. This is where you can kind of set up all your clips. I prefer this mode right here. It's a little bit quicker and easier and more traditional for an editor as well. So I've got some footage in here. And now you can see that this is right out of the camera. It's all washed out. There's not a lot of color. There's not a lot of detail. We're using those base settings that we set up in the GoPro here. So let's go ahead and start this workflow. Let's see, this seems like, let's see, I'm just looking for a good spot that's good representation of what we're seeing. There's some good detail right about in there. Okay, let's start there. That'll give me an idea for highlights and shadows and all that. Now down at the bottom here, you've got your color wheel, you've got different effects and things like that that you can click to. This is meant to be a step-by-step process in your workflow. It's really neat the way it's set up in DaVinci Resolve actually. So we're gonna hop into color. First step is that color correction. I'm gonna hop in here, and in this, it can be really daunting at first. Okay, we're just gonna stick to some of the basics. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hop over to what are called the color wheels, right here. And the color wheels are basically your shadows, midtones, and highlights. Okay, shadows, midtones, and highlights. That's what we've got. And you can see I've already brought up the scopes over here and set them to parade. And if you want to change that over on the right side here, you can change what it is that you're viewing. I put it to 10-bit because that's what's coming out of the GoPro. On the vector scope, I put standard, right? And then in here, I think by default it shows up with the vector scope maybe. No, it doesn't show up with that one. Histogram? One of these here, waveform. That's the one that it shows up with by default. Now, you can use this if you know how to. If you know how to read these different scopes, go for it. I'm familiar with the parade one, so I'm gonna go there. And right away, looking at this, you can see on the right side of my image, I've got lots of highlights going on here. Okay, and it's completely washed out. And you can see that overall the shadows are pretty good. So I'm not gonna do a lot with the shadows, but I am gonna hop up to those highlights here, and I'm gonna dial those down. So I'm just grabbing this little wheel here on gain, and I'm gonna bring that down so that those highlights aren't so crazy out of control there. And we'll bring that down right about in there so we're not losing any of those colors. Now in the midtones, this is to your liking. Do you want it to be a little bit brighter? Do you want it to be darker? I'm basically gonna reset that because they were fine right where they were. Okay, not a lot of adjustments here. Now this is my first node. Okay, this is a node over here, and this is like your workflow, and this shows the different adjustments that you're making. And it's kind of fun. You can like see what you've done along the way as you like serialize these nodes together. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna right click here, and I'm gonna add another node, and I'm gonna say that it's a serial node. And on this node, I'm going to only focus on the next step, which is when we take and sharpen our image. So you can see the image is really soft right now. It's kind of washed out, not a lot of lines of detail or anything like that. So I'm going to hop into the next setting. So we were in color wheels, and now we're going to hop into the sharpen blur one. Okay, when I hop in here, by default, I believe it starts on blur. We're not going to need that. It's already blurry. We're going to hop in here. We're going to go to sharpen. Now there's only one setting in here that I'm going to touch. Only one. And I'm going to be very careful how I do this. So I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to move this up so again I can see that stem cap here. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to adjust this one right here, the radius. And I'm going to bring that down. And as I bring it down, see how it gets more and more sharp here? Now you got to be really, really careful with this one because it can get out of control in a hurry. So this is where it started at 50 or 0.50. Okay, I'm going to bring that down and I'm just going to bring it to like 44 here to start with. Then I'm going to zoom back out and I'm going to double check that this isn't out of control already. This is nice. I can see the detail on my handlebars, and if I look at those leaves now, okay, I can see what that looked like. So here's the before, right, where it's kind of got that blur to it. And now I'm going to bring it down to 47 or 44 even. And if you think you've got the right levels of sharpness, okay, you might want to go back and just go a little bit less because it's really easy to overdo this. So I'm going to go to 44 because that feels just about right here, okay? And now I've got that sharpness back in there. All right, that's looking much better overall. All right, so next step, we color corrected, we sharpened, and now we're gonna color grade. And we're gonna keep it really simple because we're not here to learn all the ins and outs of these programs, just the basics to make your footage look better. So I'm gonna go up to the node system. All right, the first one was my color correction. There's my sharpen. And now I'm gonna add another node. So I just right clicked on there. And I'm gonna go to, where are we at? Add node, add serial, boom. Now on this one, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to add a LUT. Now I've got the Wisco MTB LUT that we've got. I'm just gonna go ahead with that. It won't be in your DaVinci Resolve by default, so you're gonna have to add it if you're going to use that. And that goes the same for any other LUTs that you've got. And later on, if you create a LUT with me in the next tutorial here, you would go through this process adding this LUT in as well. Whatever LUT you're gonna use, it may not be in DaVinci Resolve by default, so you're gonna have to add it into an overall list and populate that list with your LUT. This is how you would go about doing that. I'm gonna go ahead and drag Resolve over a little bit here so I can see my desktop where I currently have my LUT sitting. I'm gonna click on the little gear down in the corner of Resolve here. I'm gonna grab that, come on over here, and I'm gonna go to open this LUT folder. Now, if you're not seeing this, you're gonna click on the Color Management tab, okay? And in the Lookup Tables area, which we're zoomed in on right now, we're gonna go Open LUT folder. Now these are all the pre-existing LUTs that are installed. You can see that there's DJI LUTs in here. There's a bunch of stuff that's in here. If you work with Blackmagic cameras, Canon, there's a lot of stuff in here. So if you're doing other footage, this is where you would go to see these LUTs. Now, I don't have that Wisco MTB LUT in here by default. You won't either. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that in. So I can literally scroll down, and you can see I've put it in here already, but I'll show you this process anyway. And it's drag and drop. I grab it from my desktop. Oh, not double click on it there. Grab it from my desktop and I can bring it on over here, and you can see that I can add it in to this folder. And it's already in there, so I'm not going to do it a second time. Once I add that in there, I'm going to go ahead and close up this window. And then the main thing that I have to remember here is I have to update my list. So I'm going to click Update List so that it's got the newest and greatest in there. I'm going to go ahead and save. And now I'm ready to go for that next step here. So don't forget, we created our third node up here. This node is going to be focused in for the actual LUT that we're going to add. And right now you can see it says no color correction. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to go down to the LUT tab here. And now these are all alphabetically in here, so I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of my list here, which is considerable, and you can see right at the bottom Wisco MTB. All right, now I'm gonna zoom out so you can see this because it's dramatic when it happens here. I'm gonna go ahead and click on this, boom, and voila, there it is. There's our look, okay? And you can really see that red dirt in Cuyuna pop here. So if you're up in Minnesota, you're in Iron Country, you really wanna bring your footage to life, this is the ticket right here, okay? So I added that on there. Now I can do a few more adjustments to see what I like here. I might think that this is oversaturated to begin with. A lot of times it tends to be. So if you want to go back and tweak that just ever so slightly, let me drag this back into position. Here's how we do that. I'd go back to those color wheels. Let's go back to our very first node. I'm going to go to those color wheels, and in those color wheels, this is where I can adjust my my highlights, my shadows, all of that stuff. And on top of that, I can adjust my overall saturation. So when I look down at the bottom here, I can go ahead and click on that saturation and drag it down. You can see I'm taking out some of that saturation there so it's not so out of control. So I'm gonna set that right about 44-ish, right there. And again, this is to your liking, so whatever you wanna do with that. Well, that's gonna wrap it up for today. I know we got a little techie, but hopefully that information will help you take your GoPro footage and make it look incredible. Again, I'm Tim from Wisco MTV. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.